The revelation of the revelation. The four Gospels explained by their writers by Jean-Baptiste Roustaing, 1881. Source: www.tinyurl.com/the four Gospels. Birth of Jesus. Matthew, chapter 1, verses 18 to 25. And Luke, chapter 2, verses 1 to 7.
Matthew. Appearance of the angel to Joseph in a dream. Now the birth of Jesus Christ was thus: his mother Mary having been betrothed to Joseph, it was found that she was pregnant by the Holy Spirit before they had been together. And Joseph her husband, being a righteous man, and not wishing to put her to shame, resolved to divorce her secretly. And while he was thinking over these things, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not fear to take to thyself Mary thy wife, for that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit. And she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Jesus, for he shall save his people from their sins. And all this was done that the word spoken by the Lord through the prophet should be fulfilled, saying, Behold, the virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel, the translation of which is, God with us. And Joseph, having awaked from his sleep, acted as the angel of the Lord had commanded him, and took to himself his wife, and knew her not until she had brought forth her firstborn son, and he called his name Jesus. Luke. Birth of Jesus through the agency of the Holy Spirit. And it came to pass in those days that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that the whole civilized world should be registered, and this registration was first made when Cyrenius was governor of Syria. And all went to be registered, each in his own city. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the city of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed wife, who was pregnant. And so it was that while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered, and she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him down in the manger, because there was no room for them in the inn.
Section 30. Joseph did not, like Jesus, remember his origin, or perceive his destiny, for he was subject to the laws of human incarnation, notwithstanding the superiority of his spirit. He was a just man, but he was a man, and being influenced by human prejudices, he intended at first to divorce Mary secretly. The revelation made to him, by the angel in a dream, partly removed the veil from his intelligence. He was a lofty-spirited man, and understood the sanctity of his mission. He therefore joyfully accepted the part in the work assigned to him, which was the human charge of the Lord. Do not be surprised that the evangelist openly published the secret resolution formed by Joseph, and the secret revelation which set it aside. It was necessary for all to understand, in due time, that Jesus was not born like other men, and the words of the angel, that which is born in her has been formed by the Holy Spirit, were useful in their literal sense, while the spiritual meaning was reserved to form the basis of the new revelation of the future. You should understand how the angel appeared to Joseph in a dream, although this manifestation has sometimes been criticized or ridiculed. It is always better to suspend your judgment than to deny or ridicule what you do not understand. During sleep, the spirit is often sufficiently freed from matter to commune with the friendly spirits around it. When this disengagement is complete, the spirit rises and mingles with the heavenly hosts, if it is itself sufficiently elevated, though without ever leaving the zone of your planet. If the disengagement is incomplete, sympathizing spirits descend towards you. This communion takes place, whatever may be your moral state, but generally with spirits of your own degree. Sometimes, however, higher spirits descend, to instruct you during these brief intervals of freedom, to remind you of your engagements, and to show you the difficulties with which you will have to contend. All communication which takes place during sleep may be classed among dreams, but whereas ordinary dreams are generally the result of recollections, or of the struggle between matter and spirit, dreams like that of Joseph are revelations. But do not, on this account, try to discover the meaning of all your dreams, any more than you would expect to find a connected meaning in the prattle of a child. There was communion of spirit with spirit in the case of Joseph, and just as you often remember your dreams, however trivial, when the spirit is imperfectly disengaged, so Joseph remembered what had passed when he awoke. When the spirit is completely disengaged, it only retains this recollection in exceptional cases, when the impression has been renewed on waking by spiritual influence. Many of your human recollections are due to a similar influence, which recalls past events when they may be useful to you in the future. Section 31. Throughout the whole of his earthly mission, Jesus was looked upon as a man, the son of Mary and Joseph. Subsequently to the Ascension, when the Annunciation to Mary and the dream of Joseph were first made public, Jesus was regarded as a man, and at the same time as an incarnate God, miraculously born, through the agency of the Holy Spirit. The common belief regarding the birth of Jesus was due to a spiritual revelation suited to the necessities and intelligence of the age, and was needful to prepare mankind to understand spiritual life. It was consequently shared by the evangelists, the apostles, the disciples, and the multitude, for if the evangelists had known the spiritual origin of Jesus, they would have been impostors, who represented him as subject to the conditions of your humanity, and at the same time as a divine incarnation. The evangelists, like the apostles and disciples, were simple-minded in their incarnate state, and were as little children in humility and intelligence. They received the spiritual revelation made to Mary and Joseph, as sent from God himself. They faithfully recorded this revelation and the events which followed, and each of them accomplished his appointed task by mediumic influence and inspiration. This was necessary, compare section 14, because men required a striking example. The idealization of matter has prepared you to understand the spiritual life, and time and successive reincarnations have continued your expiation, reparation, and progress for nearly 20 centuries. You have now been led on to the new era of Spiritism, for which the progress which you have slowly and laboriously acquired since the Master descended among you, has prepared the way. The letter has borne its fruits, and is no longer suited to the needs of your age, and to the condition and progress of your intelligence. Now that it kills, it must be superseded by the Spirit which giveth life. The time has come to explain to you how the birth of Jesus was effected by the agency of the Holy Spirit in accordance with the will of God, and the eternally immutable laws of nature. It was the result of spiritual and magnetic action, by means of appropriate fluids. Magnetism is the universal agent which moves everything, and pervades all the kingdoms of nature. Is it not magnetic attraction which attracts the male to the female even in the most desolate parts of the earth, although they may be widely separated? Is it not magnetic attraction which attracts the fertilizing principle from one flower to another, and which draws together the substances needful to form minerals in the bowels of the earth, and leads the waters to flow towards dry countries which require irrigation? Everything in the universe is due to magnetic attraction. It is the great law which governs all things. When man shall be sufficiently enlightened to understand its full extent, the world will be subject to his control, for he will be able to direct its material action, but he cannot attain this power without a long and profound study of causes, or until he is filled with love and reverence for him, who has entrusted him with such great powers. When man is guided by this love and reverence, and filled with heartfelt humility and unselfishness, study and labor will finally enable him to acquire a knowledge of the various natures, properties and effects of all fluids, and of their various combinations and transformations. He will then possess the secret of universal life, and of the formation of all things in all the kingdoms of nature, through combined spiritual and magnetic action, according to the immutable laws of God. The magnetic fluids link together all the worlds in the universe, and unite all spirits, whether incarnate or not. It is a universal bond that God has given us, to surround us like a single being, and to aid us to ascend towards Him by the union of our strength. The fluids are united by magnetic action, and everything in nature is attraction depending on this universal agent. In addition to animal, vegetable, and universal magnetism, human and spiritual magnetism also exist on your planet. Human magnetism is the concentration of the fluids contained in man, and in the surrounding atmosphere, by the power of the human will. It can act by means of these fluids at some distance between man and man, or on objects. Spirit magnetism results from the concentration of the will of spirits, which draws around them whatever fluids may be contained in man, or scattered through space. They use these fluids to act on men or things, and to effect their objects. The birth of Jesus was the work of the Holy Spirit, for it was the work of the spirits of the Lord, and was effected by spiritual magnetism. You can judge of the power of well-directed human fluids, by the effects of spiritual magnetism on man. The spirits appointed to prepare for the appearance of the Messiah upon earth, drew around Mary the fluids needed to produce an illusion, and the annunciation made to her by the angel, thus appeared to her to be literally fulfilled. We may remind you that those who are supposed to be insane, but are only the sport of obsessing spirits, sometimes experience similar illusions, but in such cases, the illusion is confined to themselves alone, and does not extend to those around them. The subsequent birth of the child was also the work of the Holy Spirit, for it was effected by the spirits of the Lord. It was simply apparent, for, at the appointed period, the surrounding spirits placed Mary under a magnetic spiritual influence, and caused her to believe that a real birth had taken place. You know that a human magnetizer can cause his subject to experience all sensations and impressions in the somnambulic state by the power of his will, and of well-directed human fluids. He can make him see and believe whatever he wishes, and can impress him with a fiction as if it were a reality, and make him apparently experience, and even endure, suffering, and then free him from it. If you had studied all the phases of human magnetism, you would have seen subjects who are easily affected influenced without being in the magnetic sleep, or at least without exhibiting any of its recognized symptoms. In such cases, magnetic action has influenced the spirit without affecting the body. There are some subjects who enjoy a development of their faculties above ordinary humanity. These exceptional subjects are not only gifted with more than human faculties, like all free spirits, but they enjoy faculties superior to those of your best clairvoyants, and are sometimes even capable of solving problems that an incarnate spirit dare not and cannot propound, questions which man dare not propose to science, not from humility, or a wise estimate of his powers, but because he believes it to be incapable of solving them. These subjects are still rare, but will become more numerous by the employment of the power which is entrusted to you. They will conduce vastly to the improvement of the arts and sciences on your planet. These instruments are more perfect than others, but are also more easily injured, for when mediumic faculties are ill-directed, they wear out more rapidly. On this account, but few have been hitherto revealed to you, for you must first increase your experience of magnetism. You are also aware that forgetfulness on waking is the rule in somnambulism, but in exceptional cases the magnetizer can, by the power of his will, and by an express command, enable the somnambulist to retain the memory of something which has occurred in his trance, after he awakes. Everything which the human magnetizer can perform on his subject by human magnetism, can also be effected by spirits through spirit magnetism. They act with more discernment and knowledge than man acts on man, according to the conditions necessary to produce the results which they wish to attain. They can, as spiritual science teaches you, cause you to feel blows, or pain arising and ceasing at the will of those who act upon you without your being able to perceive it. You also know by many examples in all ages as well as in your own, how the blow, or pain, is felt. We will explain the action of magnetism on the spirit of the magnetized subject. This explanation applies both to human and to spirit magnetism, only the causes and results of the action of spirit magnetism are purer. Nevertheless, the result of both cases is the same: the incarnate spirit is disengaged under more or less favorable conditions, in proportion to the elevation of the magnetizer, whether man or spirit. You must understand that magnetism effects the disengagement of the spirit, and therefore cannot work illusions upon it. When the spirit is thus released from the bonds of the flesh, it becomes the willing agent of its magnetizer, whether the magnetic action proceeds from a free or from an incarnate spirit. Recollection on awaking results from the compliance of the magnetized subject, who consents to the wishes of his magnetizer, either from sympathy, weakness, or subordination, according to the relations existing between them. He thus preserves the recollection of the words or actions which he has voluntarily agreed upon during sleep, under the influence of material sensations and impressions, which retain the influence of the engagement he has undertaken, and, upon awaking, he remembers them as if they had actually taken place. If the spirits of the magnetizer and the subject are in sympathy, the recollection is due to the understanding which exists between them. If the subject is weaker than the magnetizer, and the latter imposes the recollection by his arbitrary will, the free spirit sometimes consents, but if the spirit of the subject is inferior to that of the magnetizer, it obeys from deference and respect. It was needful for Mary to believe in a real birth, and to remember circumstances which she could attest as if they had really happened. The spirits appointed to prepare for the appearance of the Messiah on your earth placed Mary under the influence of spirit magnetism, and in this somnambulic condition they caused her to perceive and to experience whatever was necessary. Mary was then in the same condition as the subjects of whom we have just spoken, who are met with, though rarely, at the present day. It therefore appeared to Mary as if a birth had actually taken place, and in due time she fulfilled the formalities prescribed for purification by the law of Moses. As Mary was in sympathy with the high spirits who acted on her, she undertook to retain in her material memory the circumstances which it was necessary for her to remember, and thus to obey the will which was imposed on her in the name of the Lord. The magnetic spiritual influence ceased at the moment when Jesus appeared as if by ordinary birth, under the form of a newborn infant, and Mary took the infant in her arms, believing that it was born from her through the influence of the Holy Spirit. Mary was almost a child in years, and very inexperienced in human affairs, having always lived in adoration and contemplation. She took the infant and blessed God. The spirits who surround you, and who have reached a certain degree of elevation, can act on the fluids by their willpower, and attract those which are necessary. By combining these, they can impress the bodily eyes of men with whatever pictures they desire them to see. These methods are only employed in important cases, and man ought not to imagine that he is always subject to these spiritual hallucinations, but they are employed whenever they are necessary to attain a result useful to mankind. By spiritual hallucinations we mean those spiritual effects which represent something to human eyes which has no actual material or spiritual existence, but which is only an illusion produced by spirit influence, by means of a simple combination of fluids. The phenomenon called the multiplication of the loaves and fishes, which we shall explain in its place, was simply due to spirit action, and the combination of fluids necessary to produce the required result. By similar methods, guilty spirits in the errant state are brought face to face with their victims, or with the crimes which they have committed, and either see the bloody panorama of the past or the fearful sufferings of the future unrolled before them. The fluids used by the ministering spirits produce living pictures or the appearance of objects to the eyes of the guilty, and form a complete illusion in either case. If necessary, the illusion might have been extended to those around Mary, but the mysterious prestige which was to attach to this birth forbade it. Mary was alone at the time, and it was therefore easy to produce an illusion which did not require to be carried very far in the case of one whose material life had scarcely unfolded, for the contemplative life of Mary had shielded her from all material aspirations and sensations. We have told you that Mary was a very pure spirit, whose mission was to aid in a work which was about to be accomplished. She did not seek, like you, to understand the means by which unusual occurrences might be effected. The angel had assured her that she would have a son, to human eyes, whose essence should be different from hers, or from the human essence of your planet. She obeyed, and fulfilled the task which she had accepted, with faith, submission, and love. The angel had informed her that she was only an instrument, and she received the child which she believed to be her own, and of which the human charge was assigned to her, as the work of the Holy Spirit, without seeking for a natural solution to the problem. Let not those who are always finding fault say that this was only a vain show. It is not so, for your nature is subject to many mysteries which you do not understand, and which arise solely from the combination of these fluids, which we make use of for your benefit and progress. We never act capriciously, but always in accordance with the will of the Lord. All that occurred was necessary to commence the new transitory era on which humanity was then about to enter, and to prepare for the advent of the present era, Spiritism and the new revelation. The progressive revelation of each era is appropriate to the needs of the age, and to the state of intelligence of the time. It is veiled by the letter when necessary, always teaching you more and more truth in proportion as you are able to receive and bear it, and gradually lifting part of the veil which conceals it from your gaze. The apostles said well that Jesus had a body similar to yours. Had not his body the appearance of yours? Were not his bodily requirements apparently the same? Yes, Jesus had a body similar to yours, but not of the same nature. The birth of Jesus was the work of the Holy Spirit, for all its preceding and attending circumstances were the work of the spirits of the Lord, compare section 14. The appearance of Jesus was his own act. It was necessary for him to undertake this mission, firstly, because he was entrusted with the progress of man, and, secondly, because he was the only spirit laboring at the progress of your planet, and of its humanity, whose power over the superior regions enabled him to appropriate the elements which enter into the formation of bodies in the fluidic worlds to the fluids of your planet, and thus to produce a body of a mixed nature, but almost material, simulating to human eyes the body of man in your world. No other body could have answered the required conditions. Jesus is in truth a perfect spirit, pure among the purest of those who labor under his direction at your progress, regeneration, and physical, moral and intellectual transformation, to lead you to perfection. Jesus was not subject to incarnation upon any planet whatever, but was thoroughly acquainted from the first with all the fluids fitted for incorporation, or incarnation on all the material or fluidic worlds, and with the application of all the immutable and universal laws of nature. He alone possessed sufficient knowledge and power to construct this perispiritic envelope resembling the human body, fitted for long tangibility, and intended to serve for the accomplishment of his earthly mission. He alone had the power to abandon it, or to resume it at any moment, by holding its constituent atoms always ready to separate, or to combine under the influence of his powerful will. But his elevation was so great as to be incompatible with your essence, and he could not be bound to material human incarnation. He could no more endure the contact of matter than you can endure a foul odor. Matter oppresses spirit in proportion to its density, and even if a superior spirit assumes a material body to accomplish a mission among you, he is more or less fallible, and does not pass an absolutely unsullied life. Yet you have even now among you missionary spirits who endure the burden of the flesh. Jesus could not, and ought not, on account of his spiritual nature and position to endure this slavery. During the period that the necessities of his mission required him to appear among men, he retained full knowledge of his origin, and the certainty of his future. He still was and continued to be the protector and ruler of the world, ruling over life and universal harmony in all the kingdoms of nature. He was still in constant communion with God, and gave his commands through his messengers to the whole hierarchy of spirits who guide your planet and its humanity. We have already told you, section 14, that Jesus appeared on earth by incorporation. It is the only instance which has hitherto happened in your world, but will be repeated in due course, and when it occurs again, you will know that the hour of the regeneration foretold by Christ, and so long prepared and hoped for, has at length arrived. Let those hear who have ears to hear, and let them not proudly deny what they cannot yet explain, for they are ignorant of the natural laws which God has established. They know nothing of the properties and effects of the fluids, nor do they understand how their combinations and adaptations can produce beings a priori in the material or fluidic worlds, scattered throughout space either by incarnation or by incorporation, but always in accordance with immutable law. The birth of Jesus was simply an appearance, effected by the spirits of the Lord, according to the divine will, and appropriate to the intelligence of the age. The appearance of Jesus was thus that of a materialized spirit, similar to those which have appeared at all ages, and which you may meet with at the present day, but with this difference only, that the perisprit was humanized by the powerful will of the Master acting on the surrounding fluids, and while presenting all the appearances of human life, was fitted for long tangibility, which was maintained or laid aside at the powerful will of Jesus, according to the necessities of his earthly mission. It was reserved for the new revelation to explain to you what mankind could not receive when the Christ descended among you, but which was hidden beneath the words spoken by the angel to Mary at the Annunciation, and to Joseph in a dream. It was left till then to raise the veil, to replace the letter by the Spirit, and also to explain the error perpetuated by the letter, and by the ignorance of former ages, and to teach you the truth which the progress of intelligence enables you to receive. Jesus did not assume a material human form contrary to the natural laws of your planet, and of other material worlds. The immutable will of God never departs from the laws which he has established from all eternity. Nor did Jesus assume a material human body like yours, according to the laws of your planet, through the act of Mary and Joseph. This would contradict the words of the angel, and blaspheme God himself by rejecting the word of his messenger as an absolute lie. The new revelation explains the true spiritual significance of those words of the angel which have been wrongly interpreted, because they have been taken literally, in ignorance of their true meaning. That which is born in her is formed by the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit will watch over thee, and the power of the Most High will overshadow thee. It replaces error by truth, and teaches men that the birth of Jesus was simply apparent, and that his appearance was wholly spiritual, and independent of the laws of human incarnation. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, with the concurrence of the apostles. Section 32. Had Joseph and Mary friends or relatives in Bethlehem, and if so, why was Mary obliged to take shelter in a stable, and to lay the child in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn? The great influx of travelers set limits to hospitality, even in the inn. The Hebrews, especially those belonging to the lower classes, did not build princely hotels. Joseph had a brother living at Bethlehem, but he could not accommodate him, because he had had no previous notice of his arrival, and his house was already crowded with other guests. Joseph was not expected, his brother had invited him, but he would not part from Mary. He had therefore declined the invitation for himself and his wife, supposing that the child, which he knew by revelation would be a boy, would probably be born about that time. It was not supposed that Mary would have ventured to undertake the journey, and therefore no one expected her, but driven by the Spirit, to use a scriptural phrase, that is to say, under the inspiration of her guardian angel, she resolved to do so at the last moment. It was needful that Jesus should be born thus, in a miserable place, far from men or from human assistance, to set a greater example of humility, and also to simplify the manner of his birth. Compare section 31. Mary was received into the house of Joseph's brother as soon as the departure of visitors had left room for her. The news was spread that the child was born, but the report traveled slowly, and Zacharias and Elizabeth did not hear it from common rumor, but from Joseph himself, who went to convey the good news to them. They went to adore the little child, but as their words and actions were of no importance to the gospel narratives, they were passed over in silence, and when their mission was fulfilled, they retired into obscurity, for there was no further need to mention them. It was the same with all the incarnate spirits who had asked to share in the accomplishment of the work which was to make the earthly mission of Jesus a reality. The revelation of the revelation. The four Gospels explained by their writers by Jean-Baptiste Roustaing, 1881. Source: www.tinyurl.com/the4gospels.